And in the meantime, the Prime Minister arrived, he and his family, and they were seated. The President arrived, and he was seated. And then I said to them, this is unacceptable, and we left. The reason I'm recounting all of this is that the minister said we arrived late. That's not true. We arrived before some ministers and before the Prime Minister and the President arrived. We arrived on time. Secondly, she created the impression that I arrived at the same time as the President, and I basically conveying the impression I sought to upstage him. I arrived in the bus with our members of Parliament, not separately. I think they saw my vehicle going to the parking area and she assumed, or she got a report that I was in the vehicle. But I was not in the vehicle. I arrived there in the bus, and I was seated there. So the vehicle may have been circling for parking, etc., for a while, my vehicle, but I had arrived a long time before that. So that was also erroneous. I saw the Prime Minister saying, I said we would leave the walkout. But, you know, this guy sings for his supper. And I'll deal with him in a few moments about the act of cowardice that he had in Parliament, but that he, on the rice motion. But we had to be really silly to tell the minister not to find seats for us so that we could walk out. You know, it's really pushing it, because we were there, we made it clear, etc. But he, as usual, he's irrelevant. The walk-in, we had to leave. It's almost the humiliation. I believe it was designed to humiliate people, but at worst it's incompetence. But either way, I couldn't stay there as a leader and watch all of our MPs with their spouses, etc., just standing there in the corridor. When you have a VIP area, or the two areas, with 1,000 seats, and they couldn't find space for 25 of them. 1,000 seats. These are members of Parliament. And when I looked at what the people who were there, half of them were revelers, it seems, who were there. And so that was the reason we left. And so this attempt to portray, I've seen various attempts to spin this issue. It's not, it was a clear case, not of just protocol, because we're not big sticklers, just of decency. Decency. If you invite people, particularly members of Parliament, they should be seated. You can't have them being humiliated standing in the corridor. And so all the protocols were respected. Which entrance we went through, you know, because it was so confusing, but we got in there. That's what the minister sought to focus on in her press release, that we went through some entrance and whatever happened there and all of that. We got there to the VIP area on time before the arrival of the Prime Minister and the President, long before that. That's one issue. The second issue is, has to do with the Parliament itself. You may know that we have been trying for a very long time to get a list of people, or the list of people who were released by the President a year ago from the prisons, or pardoned by the President, Our argument is that the president has the power to issue pardons, but the country, he has a right to know who he pardoned. Not that we are questioning his authority to pardon, but the country has a right to know. This matter has been treated like a state secret. Under the Freedom of Information Act, first of all, we raised this issue hoping that public pressure would cause the president and the others to release the list, that he would direct his staff to do so. This failed. We tried almost 6-8 months raising questions at press conferences, etc. It failed. We then applied to using the Freedom of Information Act to the Commissioner of Information for this information. He wrote us and he said, you have to seek this first of all from the primary source. So we wrote the Office of the President asking them for this information. Silence. We have recently written, we have placed a question in Parliament requesting this information. Now, Parliament is supposed to be the supreme body for transparency. Questions asked of ministers, etc., and even of the president should be answered there. We have just received a notice from the Speaker that he would not allow our questions on the question. So this Speaker has demonstrated a pattern of behavior. He seems to think that every act of the president, where he has to take his lead from the president, not be accountable for the stewardship of the National Assembly. When the president said that the rice industry was a private industry, the Speaker denied our motion using the same claim, that it's a private industry. We retabled that motion, and only recently, you recall when we placed it there the first time, that was his explanation. And we retabled it, and only recently it was debated. When we dealt with said that we wanted the matter discussed urgently, the closure of wheels, this Speaker indicated that he would not allow it because the government has already pronounced, basically, and that the closure will take place over the course of the year. Now that a decision was made. If you're going to reverse the decision, you have to do it immediately. And now this third issue, we have seen how the Speaker has acted. This is apart from the numerous other instances that we have pointed out, and the numerous instances where the government has suspended the standing orders, violated every single parliamentary norm to get their way in Parliament. So I've had some discussions with several people, including I met the Commonwealth Secretary General, person I've known for a long time, a few days ago, and I've raised this issue. We raised it with the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association about the new norm for parliamentary matters in Guyana, how this APNU government sees parliamentary democracy, and it departs radically from the convention and from the Westminster model. And so we are worried now that our voices would be muzzled in Parliament too. So let me use the press conference to once again point out to you how the government sees these motions. Normally, the motion is the last person to speak on a motion is the presenter of the motion. So we saw a departure in the parliament the last time when we were debating the rice motion. The motion was in Irfan Ali's name. He finished speaking, and Nagamutu jumped up, and then he proceeded to give a long speech about the rice industry. He did so, and I said it there, because he's a coward. He could have spoken just before Irfan Ali, but he was afraid that Irfan Ali would have responded to him, or I would have spoken after him. And this is this same fear that drives him not to have to respect the convention at budget time, where the leader of the opposition is the penultimate speaker. So he's worried about speaking before me because his speeches are vacuous, hollow. They lack substance. He plays to the gallery. He is very insecure. So he believes that only by criticizing the PPP and by being rabidly hostile to the PPP and its policies and its history, that he can keep his place in that configuration in which he feels so insecure. He has no power, absolutely. He enjoys the position. And so let me give you a few things that he said. The PPP did a bad job. They tear gas the rice farmers. And they dropped someone's pans in the Essequibo Coast. Some man who dropped his pans. Remember the story? One of their activists who now is working for them. And that the Dawa pump had sand, and he had to go and personally crawl in there and scoop out the sand from the Dawa pump. And how he fixed one pump somewhere in Berbice. And this is that this government is so sympathetic to rice farmers because they did that. And I